Welcome. This is Jim, host of the Faith Influencer podcast, where we're going to dive into discussions on faith's role in everyday life, from navigating blended families to overcoming challenges. I'm a husband, a father, a Bible teacher, an advocate for applying faith to everyday life. So tune in as I share personal stories, valuable insights, and practical wisdom. Blended family. You're not failing, you're just using the wrong playbook. And I'm going to say that over and over in this podcast. Fair warning. Welcome. This is Jim Cunningham, Faith Influencer. I'm excited with things that are going on. And today I'm going to give you little pieces of blended family information that I've compiled. As a matter of fact, I've compiled it in a book that I've sent to the editor, and I'm very excited about. But all of these things that we have been going over for literally these last couple of years, we have put them together, and you're going to be able to have them in a short form. And I want to give you some ideas what's coming out of that in today's podcast. So let's jump right in. Why is it that most blended families struggle? And I'm going to say every family struggles, but a blended family has their own struggle. And I want to talk about why that is and what actually works. And so here we go. If you're a blended family and this whole thing feels way harder than what you thought it was going to, than what you expected, I want to tell you what changed everything for my blended family. Something that was a game changer for us. And what it was is that I realized that we weren't failing as a blended family. We were just using the wrong playbook. And that's the biggest mistake that people make. They use the wrong playbook. They use the traditional family playbook for their blended family. And I understand why, because nobody hands you the blended family playbooks. Matter of fact, I looked for it and it's not out there. That's why I wrote one myself. It's kind of like when you have your first kid and here he is. You take him home or take her home and be a parent. Well, you're young and you've never had kids and no one handed you the book. And so what do? Well, you begin learning. Well, that's what happens in a blended family. You find a new relationship, you bring your kids together, and off you go on a blended family. And you struggle. And why? Because you don't have the right playbook. No one handed you how it's different in the blended family and how to handle all of the issues that do not pop up in a traditional family. So let me walk through just bite-sized pieces that I think will help you nail some of this down. So I'm going to walk through several of them, and here we go. Here's the first one, and I'm going to call this identity shift. Blended families don't struggle because they lack love. They struggle because love alone isn't enough to build trust. Now, that's not the same in a traditional family. In a traditional family, there's built-in trust because we're talking about biological parents with biological kids. But guess what? Not in a blended family. In a blended family, there is not built-in trust. Now, you can like each other, and hopefully the husband and wife who've remarried love each other, but trust isn't established quickly in a blended family. As a matter of fact, it takes a long time to build trust in a blended family. Not only between husband and wife, even though you feel like you can trust them, there's always that in the back of your mind based on your previous relationship. But if that's true of the husband and wife, it's certainly true of the kids. There's a lack of trust with this new step parent. So that is a shift of identity. Let me go to the next one as I give you these bite-sized pieces. This is a big one. Nobody talks about how confusing it is when you love your new spouse, but you don't yet love their kids. And you feel even guilty for admitting that. Now, how true is that? Here you've been in a new relationship, you've been dating. Hopefully, if you've listened to me for any time, you've done some premarital counseling for sure. But now you've gotten married and you love your new spouse and they love you, but yet in the back of your mind, you may not even like their kids, let alone love them. And you probably don't love them, though you may use that word because you haven't been together long enough to even establish that kind of relationship. So I want to say it again. What happens is it's so confusing that you can be so in love with your new spouse and not love their kids. So that's the next one. Here's the third parent truth. Let's say step parent truth. Here's the truth nobody told me. The truth is step parents don't build connection through authority. They build authority through connection. Now, just the opposite of a traditional family. You do you understand why I say people are struggling? Because they have the wrong playbook. In a biological traditional family, guess what? You have authority from day one because it's a biological relationship. You already have the connection. So then people transition into a blended family. I know I have the same struggle in the beginning. You transition and you think, I'm the dad of this house. These aren't my kids, but I'm going to exercise authority. I was doing a conference, and for blended families, there was probably 50 of us there. And as I was speaking, I was talking about this truth. And there was one man sitting at the table near the front, and he spoke up and said, I don't care if they're my biological children or my stepchildren, they're going to do what I say. Literally. That's what he said. They're going to do what I say. Well, you know what I thought? I thought, I'm going to move your wife up on my prayer list because you're a jerk. I mean, that's just that attitude. And if you're married to someone like that, I'm sorry. You should have vetted that before you got married. So his was, I'm just going to lay the law down and you're going to do what I say. Well, in a blended family, you can force maybe stepchildren to do what you say, but I'm telling you, that's not true obedience. True obedience is not forcing them. True obedience comes from the heart. That's what's easier usually in a traditional family. So in blended families, if you're going to develop that relationship where you're respected like that, it starts with connection. That's a huge point. It has to start with connection. All right, here's the next one. And I'm going to call this one the loyalty bind. And again, all of these are major issues when it comes to blended family. I'm just giving them to you in bite sized pieces. A child in a blended family isn't choosing between parents, they're choosing between loyalty and survival. And that changes everything. Hear it again. They're choosing between loyalty and survival. And that changes everything. What you don't often understand is that when you bring two families together, that the children are in this loyalty bind to their biological parent. So let's say it's you, ma'am, and you remarried. And so you have a new husband and your children have a new stepdad. Well, the loyalty bind is that if they show any kind of kindness or that they even like the new stepdad, they feel a loyalty, a disloyalty to their biological parent. Now, you may not know they're feeling that, and they may not even say that or express that, but they're feeling disloyalty. And so, what do? Do they survive their blended family because this is now their reality? Or do they continue to be loyal to their biological parent that's not in this particular household? What do they do? It's this struggle between loyalty and survival. And maybe when you're sitting down with your child, depending on what age they are, maybe you need to have a real serious face to face conversation where you say to them, honey, let's talk about something and you tell me how you really feel about this. When you're having fun with your stepdad, does it make you at times feel like you're betraying your dad? Does it make you feel like you're being disloyal to your dad? Now, I don't know if they're going to tell you the truth or not, but I promise you that there is something in them that feels a little disloyal. Now, it's normal. You're not trying to reach a state where they don't ever feel it. They're going to feel that disloyalty, but you talk through that and let them know that's normal to feel that way, but that they're not being disloyal. That's a big step if you could just have that conversation. But why don't you have that conversation? Why do the majority of parents never have that conversation? Do you know why? Because you don't have the playbook that tells you this is an issue. And so you never know that they're feeling this or going through this. That's why we're going to put a playbook in your hand. Let me go to the next one. This was a story that I was an onlooker. It didn't happen to me, but I watched it play out. Broke my heart as I watched this story. I knew the family because this was in Little League. And it was a blended family, someone on our Little League team. I'm sitting on the bleacher and I'm watching. And the son, who's on the Little League team, he's going to be 8 years old, 9 years old, and he keeps in the dugout looking to the bleacher. I mean, 100 times he's turning around, looking up in the bleachers. You know what he's looking for? He's looking for his dad. He's looking for his dad to show up. He wants his dad to be there so desperately. So what he does is he literally comes out, broke my heart. And the other parents watching, tears were running down their face. He gets his glove and he comes out of the bleacher, out of the dugout, and he comes up to the bleacher and he puts his glove on the bleacher to save a spot for his dad. He wants his dad there at his ball game. Well, his mom's there and his stepdad is there, but his dad is not. He wants his dad. So when the game was over and his dad never showed up, he came out sad, but it was pretty normal. His mom said, "Good game." And it never clicked. He never said to his stepdad, "I'm so glad you were here because my dad didn't show up." He didn't say that, but guess what? The stepdad was very smart. The stepdad didn't come say, "Hey, I'm sorry your dad, but I was here for you." He didn't say anything like that. The stepdad was just there. He showed up. And if I can give you what being a step parent is like, what being a stepdad is like, it is not that your kids look at you in the same way that they look at their biological father. It's not that they call you dad like they call their biological dad dad. It's not about that at all. It's about you showing up. That's really it. For sure, in the beginning, it's about you showing up. And I promise you, when you show up, whether they say anything or not, that is building the type of connection that I've been talking to you about. That means so much to them and they know it. And later in life, they'll tell you. They'll tell you. Let's move on. Here's the next one. Let's call this a discipline reframe. A discipline reframe. Discipline in a blended family isn't about control. It's about creating safety. Now, I didn't come up with that phrase. That was a phrase that was made by child psychologist. I want to say it again because it's very important. Discipline in a blended family is not about control. It's about safety. What does that mean? It means that rules without relationship always backfires. Rules without relationship always backfires. It's similar to what I said before. I just said it in a little different way, that when you try to create rules and you don't build a relationship, it's going to backfire. I mean, that could be true even with biological kids, but biological kids, there's a different dynamic going on there, the biological piece of it. So just remember, if you're trying to establish rules and not build a relationship, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So build relationship before you build rules. And if there's got to be rules in a house, and there has to be boundaries in a house, and even in a blended family. But for these children that aren't yours, that are your stepchildren, it's the biological parent that has to lay out those rules because they have the relationship. Rules without relationship always backfires. And then let's go to the next one. The next bite-sized piece is called hope. Blended families don't need more guilt. You already have it. Blended families don't need more pressure. Blended families need a framework that actually matches the reality in which they are living. That framework is what I've been calling the playbook. So you're automatically, as much as I can talk to blended families about guilt, you're automatically going to bring guilt in to your new family. You just are. And there's going to be all of this pressure. But when you're feeling that, how many times can I tell you that by experience, I can help you get that off your plate? How do we do that? It is by building the correct framework for blended families. That's different than traditional families. I say it over and over. So I wrote this information in these bite sized pieces, and I've built this into a playbook because I was tired of pretending that blended families were simple, because they're not. They're extraordinary, they're amazing, they're a new life and a new hope. They're all of that. But at the same time, they are the furthest thing from simple as you can imagine. So I was tired of thinking, you know, this blended family is going to, you're all thinking this is going to be so much better, and how quickly it becomes so much worse. And so for me, it's like, how are we going to develop healthy, connected, and deeply meaningful blended families? Because that's my heart here. This podcast is all about blended families. It's all about strengthening blended families. How are we going to do that? By creating for you this new playbook. So let me wrap it up by saying this. If you're living this story that I'm talking about, I want you to know this. I want you to know that you're not behind, you're not broken, you're not alone. I want you to know you just need a better playbook. So I hope that will encourage you that good things, good times, good answers are coming. As always, thanks for joining our podcast, Faith Influencer, and I'm excited about talking to you next time.